States. I'll say a little bit of that again. I'm presenting on researching your ancestors who served in the Civil War with the U.S. colored troops. So let me get my screen shared together. Can y'all see the slideshow?
Yes.
Great. So just for a little bit of background, who were the U.S. colored troops? So according to the National Park Service, there are about 209,145 men and women in Black regiments of the U.S. military during the Civil War. That's Army and Navy. And there are other estimates that put it a little lower at around 180,000. But that 209,000 number is what is on the Civil War Memorial, the U.S. Colored Troops Memorial. That's how many names they supposedly have on there. And these are people who fought for freedom, but they also did jobs like being orderlies or cooks, musicians, nurses. There were women who also served as nurses and laundresses and things like that. Um, and so most of these units were formed after the surrender of Vicksburg here in Mississippi on July 4th, 1863. However, there were some units that had formed before that. For example, the Louisiana First and Second Native Guard were some of those that formed there. And the highest concentration of soldiers were from Louisiana, Mississippi, and Tennessee. And so you have those states, of course, had large enslaved populations and were in strategic places that where the war was fought. So just for some more background history on where these troops were fighting, and a key event in this war was the Siege of Vicksburg. And so within this period between, so before May 18th, 1863, the troops were making their way down from down like from the north down the Mississippi. So they won a couple of key battles there in Mississippi and then arrived in Vicksburg around May 18th, led by General Grant, and Union troops basically surrounded Vicksburg, which was a Confederate stronghold, and it was a good strategic place on the Mississippi River to take. Um, and so during this time, while they're fighting in Vicksburg, the War Department also issued the order number 143, which created the Bureau of Colored Troops to kind of organize efforts to create these regiments. And by July 4th, after almost 2 months of constant bombardment and trench warfare, they defeated the Confederates at Vicksburg. So the Confederates surrendered, and this was a huge victory for the Union, and gave them more control on the Mississippi River. And so shortly after that, you see the forming of some of the first units in Mississippi, which are in August, the 1st Mississippi Infantry African Descent formed, which that later became the 51st U.S. Colored Troops. And then in September, the 2nd Regiment U.S. Colored Heavy Artillery African Descent also formed in Natchez. And they uh, this unit actually became the 6th Heavy Artillery, which were defending uh, were fighting in Fort Pillow later in the war in the next year, which was another key event there. So it was up near Henning, Tennessee, in Lauderdale County on April 12th, 1864. And pretty much what happened was the Confederates, instead of taking prisoners, decided to basically kill all of the um, soldiers who were fighting for the Union, and more than 200 Black soldiers were killed in this massacre. And Congress did an inquiry of it. So there's a large document with like testimony and stuff from that. And here's a quote from one of the soldiers who lived after that massacre. So it says, "I saw one of the rebels walk up to a wounded colored man and blow his brains out. They shot the wounded just like they did the rest. There was no mercy shown us." And that's from Private George Shaw, who was a soldier that was there on that day. And there are a lot more testimonies, and they get more graphic than that. So that's pretty much one of the ones that tell you what happened. And then you have this picture I have this picture on the right of from the service file of Elias Falls, someone who died following that massacre. He was shot in his legs and wounded in that massacre, and later died in the hospital. And his wife filed a pension application to get a widow's pension for that. So that's kind of how I backtracked and came upon that record. So when you want to identify whether your ancestor served in the as a U.S. colored troops, one of the things and questions that you can ask, looking at the time period, the Civil War was 1861 to 1865. There were still soldiers serving a couple years after the war, but looking at that time period, would your ancestor have been of age during that time? And did they live somewhere where the Union recruited? So thinking about like the contraband camps and where they were located. And on the next slide, you'll see more about like how these locations as well. There were also, after the war, 1890, there was a veteran schedule. It was pretty much like a census of where living veterans were. So I found a couple of my ancestors on that. The National Park Service website has a soldiers and sailors database. So you can type your people's name into there, or you could browse the lists of soldiers the lists of regiments and the soldiers in those regiments, and then just searching on the regular avenues. Ancestry, Fold 3, which has a lot of military records, and Family Search also has some. And so this map here is a map of the Union, or a map of the war sites, the battle sites that the U.S. colored troops fought in. You could see a heavy concentration here around the Mississippi River. Of course, that was very strategic for the war. So if they lived within these areas, they likely came into contact with the Union or with soldiers, I guess, on either side. And so what types of records did Civil War service generate? So these are this is a list of some different records that I've found, and I'll go through in the following slides after this some examples of these records and what I found in them. So the first is a compiled service record. So these tell you where your ancestors served, where this person fought, sometimes it has like the different allowances for clothing and stuff like that. And sometimes it just might say they're present or they were sick in the hospital on this day. The veteran schedules, as I mentioned, pension applications, which most of the rest of the presentation will be about, and then pension application payment cards, which show you the rate that the person was paid during the war. And then there's also some newspaper articles that are generated. And in some instances, I did find one while I was preparing this presentation, claim from the Southern Claims Commission. And basically what that did was, this person who I found it for, he was a soldier. He enlisted in Vicksburg, and he said, I was a soldier with the Union, and the Union in the course of the war took some of my property or damaged it, and it's a claim for him to get reimbursed. And so these are structurally kind of have some of the same type of documentation that a pension application would have. So you have witnesses who can testify to these things, and they're doing that type of investigation to see whether he could be reimbursed. So these two are examples from service records, the compiled service records, and these are available on Fold 3. On the right is one of the more common looking files. So here, and this is from one of my ancestors, but this one just tells you the unit he was in, where he transferred, where he joined, where he transferred to, when he enlisted, and for how long. And those are pretty typical within the files. On the left, where you can see I have the arrow pointing, this is generated because the soldier died. And so where the arrow is, it says this person was discharged by reason of death, killed in action at Ross Landing in Arkansas, February 14th, 1864. And so you'll sometimes come across things like that in the service records as well. This one, these are also, the picture is not, but the rest of the documents are from a service record, compiled service records as well. This person is, the picture is from his pension application, but this person is James Baldwin. He, not to be confused with the writer James Baldwin, of course. He settled in Helena, Arkansas after the war, and these are some of the documents that were in his service file. And so this first one shows just what some things that are in the service file. The second one, it shows where he enlisted, when and where, and it's just from one of the days, from March and April, it's the muster roll, and it's just showing that he was present. But this third one, which is alluded to at the on the bottom of that first one that says was attached, is a claim for compensation for an enlisted slave. And so his former owner filed a claim to get reimbursed for the fact that his enslaved person, or which was his property, was taken by being enlisted in the war, or was enlisted in the war. And so in this one, it says his name, James Baldwin, the name of the former owner, and where they lived in Missouri. And there's another document in which they have his old name, that he was named as the slave. So it says like my slave boy Willis. But here you have a more this is filed later, so it has the name that he has later taken. These are, this on the left is a pension payment card. So it tells you the rate at which he was paid, $15 a month. And of course, the basic information, the name of the soldier and what where he served. But the purpose of this is pretty much the rate that he was paid and when that payment stopped. And then on the right is also from another service file for this same soldier, Fenton Green. And it just is like his enlisting document. So it says his name, he was born in Warrenton County, Virginia, 33 years old, and he was a carpenter when he enlisted in the service. And so these are the types of things that you'll find in those compiled service files. Some of them are just those long horizontal cards, which I've shown that, like the muster rolls, tell you the person was present, but they'll also sometimes have more detailed information. These are other types of records that could be generated. This bottom one is the 1890 veteran schedule, which I mentioned before. And then the top one is a claim with the Freedmen's Bureau. So I found that on Ancestry, just searching my veteran's name, and it shows this claim that he made with the Freedmen's Bureau. So it shows that he was discharged, and some names of some witnesses that signed when he made this claim. And then some newspaper articles. These are on the left. The left is an account of the Memphis massacre after the Civil War. And so you can see the name of some US colored soldiers who were killed in that massacre. And then also some that they didn't have the names for, 2 colored soldiers here at the bottom here. And then another newspaper article, this one just tells you that that a pension was granted to this veteran. So sometimes they would print those things and say that these people got pensions. So that's another way that that might be documented. And this is my ancestor. This is my 4th grade grandfather, Augustus Rochon. And so you see his pension application card, which I'll take you through in the next slide. And then just his obituary that says a little bit about him and where his life after the war. And so he's from New Orleans, and after the war settled in Bay St. Louis, Mississippi, which is on the coast. And it says he was a well-known figure in the pursuit of public carriage driver, and thousands are the visitors who have ridden in his old but clean and well-kept vehicle, and his presence at his accustomed post will be missed by many a visitor this summer. And then it also goes on to mention he was part of a benevolent association that paid for the funeral. Just some things about him and his life. Okay, so as I mentioned, his pension card. And so we're looking at here what types of information is on this pension card that you could use. And so he has, so it has his name, of course, but it also has that he served under an alias. And so the alias was Augustus Huchon or Hooch. I don't really know how to pronounce it, but that's the name that he gave when he enlisted in the service. And here it gives the names of dependents and the person who was filing that pension claim. So this is from a minor's pension claim. And here it says Augustine R. Bell, GDN. And I took that to mean grandson, but it actually meant guardian. And so this is one of his older children, Augustine Bell. She was an adult at the time, and she was she became the guardian of the 3 children that they had that were minors at the time of his death. And so that gives you a clue as into, a familiar relationship. Here it has service. So this tells you where he served. He was in Company G of the 10th U.S. Colored Troops, also Company B of the 74th, and Company C in the 91st U.S. Colored Infantry. And so that's how you would read that, and that's the different units that he served in. Here on the next to this date of filing, it under class, it tells you the types of pensions that have been filed on the behalf of this soldier. And so there is invalid, widow, minor, and there's also not listed here, but people filed for dependent parents. So if their parent was they're dependent, then someone can file a pension application on behalf of that parent. So for my ancestor, he filed an invalid pension, which basically means that he had a disability in the course of his service in the war, and also the minor pension, as I mentioned. And so these application numbers are what you would put into you would tell the National Archives when you're requesting that pension to be able to find that. But next to it is a certificate number, and these tell you that a pension was granted. If there's a number here, that means the pension was granted. And if that number is there, I usually use that number instead of the application number for them to be able to find the pension claim that I'm looking for. And then next to it, of course, is the state from which it was filed. As I mentioned, he lived in Mississippi. And as on the bottom of this one, it's not there on the bottom of this one, but sometimes they will have the date of death of the soldier at the bottom. And so how to get a Civil War pension file. So these files are held at the National Archives in Washington, D.C. I believe some are also held at the archives in St. Louis, but for the most part, you'll find them at the archives in D.C. And you can order them online through the National Archives website. I just Googled National Archives Civil War pension. And it's $80 for the first 100 pages, and they'll notify you if there are more that you need to pay for. Now, sometimes they're generous though, because I've received files that are over like 120 something pages, and they don't charge me for that. But there are also some places that have started to digitize Civil War pensions. So the International African American Museum in South Carolina has some in their online collection. I believe they've digitized about 150 files. And so if you have ancestry in South Carolina, you definitely want to check there. They all the ones that they have, they're not all from South Carolina, but a good uh a good bit of them are there. And I see I have a hand raised. Chris.
I just wanted to chime in. This has been a great presentation. In regards to the pensions, you listed some really, really good options for people to get access to their ancestors' textual history. And I just wanted to add because I go to DC pretty often to get pensions, and
Mm-hmm.
I've also been to St. Louis to retrieve them in person as well. But here's the thing. Pensions that were being paid out into the 1920s, 1930s may still be in custodianship of the Department of the VA. And I'm one of the executive board members for this site called Reclaim the Records. And there's a site that we designed called Burls, BIRLS.org. And on that site, not only can you request the military information for your ancestors, that's a free website you can go in. It'll actually create a FOIA request that will be sent directly to the Department of the VA via fax. So for any person that comes up on that you have any soldier, Civil War or not, that is now deceased, you can find their military information through that Burrow site and FOIA it out. But I mention it because you can also request those Civil War pension files, and I have done so several times using the application. So you can request those USCT pension files that are still in custodianship of the VA, believe it or not, all these years later. And so some of them were never transferred to the National Archives or the uh, National Archives at St. Louis. So just something to add in there.
Okay, cool. It's good to know. And that would work for those that are still in the VAs, so to speak, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Great. And then let's see. And also the National Archives online catalog has some digitized widows pension files. So um you can search through that catalog as well. They'll have some uh that are have been made available and digitized. And then of course, as Chris mentioned, there's also people who you can hire to go and pull those files for you. And it's likely quicker than doing that process through the National Archives because it takes months.
Yeah.
And so just here is an example of how you would go through the National Archives process to get those files to get those files sent to you. And so I filled it out and sent with the information about my ancestor, or it's not my ancestor, but information about someone who I would want that file for. So just their names, where they served, where they lived, if you know where they were born, any other information that you might have, like if they served under an alias. And then here are some of the questions that these pension applications can answer for you. And so one, like the origin, where this person was born, and like that the basic vital information about them, birth and death dates, some familial and community relationships, their prior enslavement status and owners, occupations, physical descriptors. They'll sometimes say like, this person was of this complexion and this height. And then you also get to hear from people's stories in their own words. I see there's some messages in the chat. I can't see them. So if it's something like that I should
No,
answer.
he just put the burles.org
Okay.
website in there for everyone. So yeah, no questions yet.
Okay. And just to keep in mind, like these are investigative documents. So these people are going to pretty much answer some of the same questions that you might have. Ooh, why is this moving? Okay. Investors, answer some of the same questions that you might have about your ancestors, because they're trying to find prove that they are who they say they are and prove that they're eligible for this pension. And so they might have some of the same questions that you had. And so these are some examples of things that I have found within the pension files. There are vital records in there, and sometimes there'll be recreations of records that no longer exist because they were burned, which is not in this example, but this one is a baptism record. And you see on the left at the bottom of it, it is in French. At the top is the priest who says, "In my books, I have this record." And then on the right, you have the translation. And so it says the day that she was born or baptized, and who she was, or who she belonged to at the time, and the godfather and godmother who baptized her. And this one was interesting because within this file, she does not, at some point, she does not know the date of like this baptism or the names of certain people. And as they're going through and trying to figure out the origin, they get these records back. And so, it might be information that was not readily known, but through finding or through investigating like the eligibility, they found things like this. And so burned records, I've also seen like people who this record doesn't exist. And so they have either a priest or someone who was there at the time to testify that, this record was burned, but I was there and I saw this person do this. Like I saw this person be baptized or be married or die, or I attended the funeral of the person who died. And here is another example, just to show you people speaking in their own words. So this is from my ancestor, Augustus Rochon's pension. And it's on behalf of his daughter, Augustine Bell, who is the guardian of the minor children. And so in investigating for this pension file, they wanted to prove that one, the marriage and the children were legitimate. And so she had her uncle, which is the brother of her mom, testify here. And it says, I am 60, well, I'm not gonna read the whole thing, but I'm 68 years of age. He says he's an oysterman. I was born in Norfolk, Virginia. I came south when I was a child. When freedom came, I was the slave of Ramon Cuevas, and I lived in Bay St. Louis, Mississippi. And it also says the name of his mother. It goes on later to say that they were owned by the same owner. So that tells me the owner of my ancestor and some familial relationships, because prior to getting the file, I didn't have the information of like her brothers and her brother and sisters and parents and stuff like that. This is another one from another veteran in that area of Mississippi. And so he was a Creole man. His name was Noel, but he enlisted in the service under an alias as Louis Levan. And so there are a lot of questions that came up about why he didn't know some things or why his name was different. And so I have some arrows pointing to some of the things that he said in his that was said about him. And so one, why he didn't really know the names of other people or things like that. It says that at the time of his enlistment, he spoke and understood no language but French, and hence could not understand these names as they were called at roll call or told him otherwise. And then also that during that time, he was indifferent to all but one fact: his being safe within the Union Army from the persecution and capture by his last master, Gabriel, don't want to butcher that name, Defourier, I'll say. And so that gives you some more context about why he was serving under this alias and why some of the information may differ. And these are also from his pension file. So the first one on the left, you can see a grocery list. And so these are sometimes they would try to get reimbursement for the funeral arrangements. And so his niece submitted this grocery list to show that this is something that needed to be paid for. She did not get reimbursed for that, though. She wasn't the person that paid for that. And on the right is a simple questionnaire. This is one of the things that I like to find in there because it answers some questions straight to the point. Uh, Simple questions: where they were born, where he enlisted, what was your occupation? It says he's a house servant. And then were you a slave? Yes, I had one owner, and the same owner that he mentioned before. And so also ask some questions about his military service and his height, physical description. And so just some tips for reading a pension file, some things to keep in mind. A lot of soldiers enlisted under aliases. And so I've shown you a couple that had aliases and they had to prove their identities. Some people who they were interviewing for these files couldn't read or write. And so as a result, some names may be spelled differently and some other things based on the investigators' interpretations of what they were saying. And so in the case of my ancestor, Augustus Roshan, his wife was named Mary Anna Rodrigue. But they were talking to people who spoke French, Spanish, and English. And so I've seen a couple different variations of the name and had to like kind of figure out what the name actually was because the person who was writing it was just writing down what they think the people are saying. And so another thing to be wary of, like these are white people going into uh or just any like outsider going in to like investigate what you're saying. And so your ancestor may have been wary of them and not really been forthcoming with information uh, when they're asking these questions. And then you also have to think about people's biases may also color their interpretations, and they had to make decisions about the reputations of the people, which I'll show you on the next slide. Um, this top one was this is from my ancestors file, and they are talking about the half sister of one of her half sister. And so it says that like the office was trying to catch her in a lie, and she was big and bellicose, and she grew so boisterous that I decided to leave. And so, this person, uh, that's their interaction with her and what they made of that. But also, they will have on this side, it's kind of cut off at the top, but the claimants. So these are people that they talk to within the investigating a pension application. And on the right, they have to like say this person's reputation. So this one says fair, someone is good because they're white in parentheses. There's fair to good. I've seen unreliable, I've seen ignorant or Negro and things like that. And so some things to keep in mind. And so those are the main things that I found. And once I have here, I've researched my ancestor, now what? And so this picture on the left is the U.S. Colored Troops Memorial up in DC on U Street. And so I went there while I was up at Howard and found my ancestor's name on that wall. And you could also, talk to them and register as a descendant, and they will give you a certificate like the one I have on the right. And so that's all for me. Any questions?
Tamara put some good information out there for everyone about some other resources. She's put two websites that would be beneficial. My only question is, okay, so did those show up as hints that they could have pension records, or were you actively searching, just trying different names, or how did you initially discover that you should even be looking for pension records?
So the first ones I found are, and I'll stop sharing, but the first ones I found, what came up as hints were things like the service record on Ancestry, which they don't have like images of that or anything. So it'll just say like the person's name and the name of the regiment. So you could get some hints that way. I've also just gone through and Fold 3 and typed in some names. And so yeah, but that hint part is what clued me in on the first pension file that I got.
Tamara had a question or raised her hand.
First of all, good presentation, a lot of great information. One thing you did mention, especially in our area, you got roots Tennessee, Mississippi, Kentucky, Louisiana. If you have relatives there, check to see, because these are the areas of the heaviest with recruitment. And I know when I was in Vicksburg, in that area, they said like 1 out of 4 of the black, people that live in that area, you have a USCT ancestor. So I would definitely, like I said, if you got roots in these areas, check to see. And also the fan club. It may not be your relative, but like how she was bringing up about the witnesses, it's a high probability if your relative didn't serve, they could have still been a witness for someone to verify who they were, tell that I lived on the same plantation. I was there when they got, married. So like, so those witnesses, is a good source, just because if you're, person not a soldier. And then the last thing I'm gonna say, check the Freedmen Bureau bank records, because like what you mentioned, the area you were in, like especially like Natchez and Vicksburg, they had to name their relatives when they opened those bank accounts, and you'll be surprised. A lot of them named parents, siblings, some of them named grandparents. Also, it's not everybody, but check that source. Also, you might have some. They'll tell you if they were sold off from Virginia or the parents are dead or living. But it was a real good, like I said, it was an excellent presentation. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
I think Miss Barbara had a question too.
I do. I want to thank, excuse me, I want to thank Deja for the presentation. And I'm still waiting for somebody to say, oh, Barbara, there were Black soldiers in the Confederacy. Because remember, I have 10 of them. So, I mean, not my relatives, but I would always love to have somebody just take this over one at a time. And the second thing was, did you, Deja, by any chance see the OGS presentation this past Sunday on one U.S. colored troop, one guy?
No, I haven't seen it.
Okay, I'll try to send you the reference. But this was a guy who escaped slavery in Mississippi. And he was able to get himself north into Illinois, and that's where he joined the Illinois colored troops. They were trained over to Arlington, Virginia, and then took a boat, and this is only the last year of the war. But the thing that this guy did was what you did. His resources, his original documents were just amazing as to what he found on this guy. So for anyone who's interested, it was the OGS presentation this past Sunday for I think they do it monthly for Zoom presentations. The third thing was my guests did arrive for this presentation. And Deja, do you know Chris?
We've messaged, I believe, but we haven't formally met. So yeah.
Okay, Chris is my genealogist. When you've heard me say on this platform that I can't do this stuff, I have to hire people. And Chris is my main hired man, if I may put it that way. He's done my mother, he's done Manning, Lieutenant Manning, and he's also done Ira Aldridge for me. So it's Christopher Smothers. And he is now all of, how young are you, Chris?
I'm 25.
I've had him since he was 18,
Literally.
and he started when he was 12.
Right. Yeah. But
So,
I did want to add something, if I may. When you were talking about the pension application inside, okay, two things. There's really 2 points to this. Not only are the other affidavits super valuable, like you mentioned, but sometimes it'll list other people who also served, and I'm sure you know that. But like certain pages will list those certificate numbers, and I didn't know this until this past visit to DC a couple weeks ago, that you can actually look at those certificate numbers in the Fold 3 search. And because in order to request it in person, you need the application number, you need the certificate number. And so if you have the certificate number, you can actually go into Fold 3 and search the certificate number, and it'll give you like the application number on the card. And so even if you don't know like what that person's name is because the cursive is horrible, whatever, as long as you have the certificate number, you can find them on Fold 3 like that. Yeah.
Okay, cool. I didn't know that. And what was your second thing?
Oh, the second thing was, I think the second thing was just that, a lot of people that, they request affidavits from um, were also in the Civil War. I had an ancestor whose service was out of Vicksburg. He came from Milliken's, well, he was really born in Milliken's Bend. And as you know, there's a famous Battle of Milliken's Bend in Louisiana. And through his affidavit, there was actually a photo of him in the pension file. And through his affidavit, there was a lot of descriptive information about who enslaved him and whatnot. But he also, Tamara mentioned, the Freedmen's Bank record actually listed his brother, who was my direct ancestor. And that's how I figured out. Like we had a whole nother branch of our family that was carrying a different last name. So,
Yeah. Like both of y'all said, I think also just adding on just some in like some of the files that I've read are not my ancestors or anything, but I've just gone through and like looked at people in the area, and sometimes that'll connect you. Your ancestor might be in there talking on their behalf or just mentioned in there, or you get some more information that way. So yeah, that's a good point too.
yeah, and sometimes you'll see your direct ancestors as affidavit, like people who fill out affidavits in those files. I had ancestors who married each other from adjacent plantations. And one of my grandmother's direct great grandmothers was an affidavit person on like her other like grandfather on another totally different side of her family, just because they were on adjacent plantations, everybody knew each other. Yeah.
Okay, Miss Tamara.
One thing I will say on some of my scene, people were nosy and told all your business back then. I came across some where they asked the neighbors and they'll talk about the widows on the widow's pension, about how many men been at her house, who slept in the house, how many beds she had in the house when the person slept. They literally, you would think that people were kind of more civilized back then, but you have some of them there was, like they get real nose and all into your business. How many times they went to church? Like what they got to do with the woman getting her money? So you have some humorous ones in there too. They are serious, but I have seen some of them where it's just like today, like, well, I don't know if that was his baby. That last one was kind of sus. And I seen one where the mama swapping down a widow that now she was fooling around with Gabe Hawkins when my son was in the service. So that last child is not his. And I'm like, why are you telling this woman business like this? So you have some of them that have you just rocking because they'll get just mudslinging and talking about the folks on the slide. So I just say, it's sometimes you do have some humorous stuff in it. But I love that Gabe Hawkins when the woman named who her daughter-in-law supposed to be fooling around with. Apparently she didn't want the daughter-in-law to get the pension. But she was fooling around with that man while my son was on service. Like just to let you know, you will find some crazy stuff in them too to have you laughing.
Yeah, I've seen one that had someone that sent in an anonymous letter saying, well, you need to check this woman out because I've seen men going in and out of her house, like you said. So yeah, there'll be some laughable moments in those too.
Okay. Okay, is there anybody else?
Yes, I can't help but say, Deja, you did an outstanding job, tremendous. I want to just say I applaud you.
Yes.
I haven't been participating as well as I should, and coming to the meeting and hearing you present, I am so glad that I heard you and heard what you had to say. I do have one question for you. At the very end, you mentioned how you went to DC and you got the certificate. And if you have a family member who fought in the Civil War, you can also, I'm thinking, get the certificate as well. But you can do that online. You don't necessarily have to be in the DC area physically to get that information. Can you confirm how you can get that?
I believe there's something on their website, the U.S. color. Let me just make sure I'm giving you the right information. But it's the Civil War Colored Troops Museum, I believe, and
Okay.
there's a tab on their website that
Okay.
like
I just need to
register
go.
as a descendant.
Okay. Okay. Gotcha. All right. Awesome. All right. I never saw that. I said, wait, I need to do that. Thank you. Thank you so much.
And thank you.
All right. Is there anybody else? Okay, I want, obviously, Daisha, you did a great job, and I appreciate you stepping up. And we have more people who have abilities, and you guys have been sitting back. You're going to be in the spotlight in a little bit, so you might start working on your presentations because it's important as a group as we teach. We want to teach, and then we want to be in the learner seat too. Want to have be able to get some quality information out to people who are researching, help those who are trying to do their research. And it's good to know how to do it, but I think it's even better to share it with somebody. If you want to leave some knowledge, drop some knowledge off for the people who are coming behind us. And that's why I'm seeing Deja and Mia and Sharonda, all these young people. I see Mr. Chris here, a new gentleman here visiting with us. The young people, Glenn, but we need you to carry the torch. So I am just excited and enjoyed it. Deja does a great job. I just always could never understand. She doesn't smile a lot. So I'm sitting there going, is she okay? Is that all right? But once you learn the personality, you understand that we all can't be bubbly and crazy like I am, okay? So what we're looking for, like Karen has been working on something for a while. So Karen, you got to step on up. Everybody, Mia, everybody. I want you to have an opportunity, and especially with we have different opportunities with the Tuesday teaching Tuesdays. We have that open, and what we're going to start doing in a little while is that for teaching Tuesdays, it's going to be only open for our members, and we will allow guests for when we have special presenters. And the reason is that if a person we've got teaching Tuesday, we have Tactical Thursday coming up. They're growing and we're having a great time there, but we want people to be members of the organization. So if you can come to all three presentations and not pay anything, then that means that we will not be gathering any more new members. And right now we're at 48, I believe. So we need to get 2 more members to break the 50, and then we can move on past that. So I'm excited that we are growing, and I want to see more participation from our members. Chris, you sound like you're very knowledgeable. So at some point, Barbara, you got to get with him. We get him in for something that he could share with us. So I'm always doors always open for younger people, and that does not mean older people can't do anything because we're doing what we can. So I just want to see everybody in the group progress, and I want everybody to, when they leave from their meetings, they have learned something. And today, Deja did a marvelous job because I'm working on something that I got to do for Tenji, and you just added to some of my stuff. I went, oh, I'll do that. So thank you so much. I thank everybody I was late, and I apologize for that. I ran by visitation and I had somebody taking me, and it took them longer to get me home because they don't drive like I drive. So I was kind of just waiting, going, okay, come on, I gotta go home. So thank you so much for that. Any other question? Oh, Sharon, what the dates about the newsletter? We want to remind everybody about the newsletter.
Yes. So if you have any, we're already collecting articles. It doesn't have to be it can be pictures about your travel. It can be a highlight a relative, recipes, whatever. We're asking for that because we're gonna, and you can correct me, Deja, but we're gonna distribute it in June. So we actually need it in May. So, Deja, when do you want everyone? What's the deadline to get it in so you can start working on it? I mean, you can start sending it now, but the actual deadline to get it so you can have it ready for June.
Give me 1 second.
And I'll send a reminder out to everyone as well.
So I think I wrote this down. The last one came out. Was that this month? It was March.
March.
Yes, it's actually I think we're actually doing July. So if you could get it by the first week of July.
No, I think it's really June.
It was June?
Yeah, we're doing it quarterly.
March. Okay, yeah. I can't count my months, but yeah, June.
Yeah.
So I mean, if you could give it, I mean, end of May, first week of June.
Yes.
Okay.
And the main thing is don't wait. Just go on and send it in. And that way she'll have more time to look at. We need to look at it, or somebody need to share, for a check on everything. So that we want to make sure we give her plenty of time so she won't be rushed with trying to get it done. There. Anything else? Next week will be Tactical Thursday again, on the 24th. And it's not, we don't have a theme. It's just our open Tactical Thursday. But if you've got something you want us to look at, and you remember, send that information into info@ogsmemphis.org, and that way we will already can send it out to the group, and we can kind of start working on whatever problem that is in advance, so that we can give you some results at that in the meeting. So we'll be prepared to discuss it. So I'm excited. Thank you, Deja. This was just really so informative. And like I said, for me, the talking points were just perfect. I have this presentation coming up in June with Tinjin, and I'm going to take some of this knowledge and add it to my presentation. I appreciate you going first.
Thank you. I was scared to present when I heard you were
No,
you
no,
told me you were
no.
doing one.
Excellent, but because we're gonna have to talk about those muster rolls. But anyway, so I can get it right. But thank you all for taking the time out to be a part of this. And again, we're still recruiting. You get us some new people in here, so more new people we get, the more diversity we will have. And we're going to do some other things. We got quite a few things on our slate to work on, and we're still going to have a meeting, Deja, sometime soon. We have to go in and call one and see who can come. We want to get that done. Okay, well, thank you everybody for coming today. Again, let's be on and make sure that when we post on our Facebook page, make sure some of you have been stepping up doing that, and I really appreciate it. And please continue to do that, because that way people know more about us. I saw